I lived in Finland, where I'm from. Then I went to the UK for university. I was like full on going into finance and like the corporate life. Then I did a couple of internships in big banks. Then I started learning about online business.
Why did you leave?
I didn't like the weather. I always had the dream of living in a place with sunny, warm weather where I can just wear a t-shirt every single day. And there's this place called Dubai where you have the great weather and you have no taxes. So this is perfect.
What is the biggest culture shock, do you think, for Westerners when they first come to Dubai?
There's not that many like big culture shocks. It's actually quite westernized. I would say it feels very similar to like a lot of Western cities, except without the problems.
Today's guest walked away from a high-paying job in London to build a seven-figure business in Dubai. But not for the cars or the lifestyle, he did it for freedom.
And also just because I wanted to try something different. I've also always been kind of like an adventurer, like I always want to try different things.
Join us on this episode as he breaks down how he built a location-free business.
So there's obviously always kind of two things we need to think about. You have the business and then you have your life, like where you actually want to live.
Why leaving the UK was the best thing that you could have ever done.
I ended up starting a second channel about my life around the world, being a digital nomad. I learned a lot about that when I actually left the UK to move to Dubai.
And the systems that he uses to legally pay 0% tax whilst scaling online.
I always want to be legal, even if I think it's only a 1% chance that someone might find out, which is why it's great that I can just live in Dubai where I can legally pay zero tax, have a very simple setup.
So if you're feeling like your business is being strangled by the West or that something needs to change, not just in your life, but in your business, then this is the episode for you.
Even if I don't like Dubai, I'm just going to go there because over the next couple of years with the tax savings, I can build up so much wealth, then I can take that wealth to wherever I want to go, like if I do want to live.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Guys, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This one is slightly different. So we have normally focused on kind of Ecom, info products and kind of business stuff. Today I'm joined by Tom. Very different content. He's, I'm sure you've seen his channel, but he's focused on kind of nomading, online income, moving to Dubai and kind of all that good stuff. Before I get into Tom though, I've also got a co-host today. Ben, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I moved to Dubai last April and I have a big interest in the whole nomad lifestyle, entrepreneur, company setup, structures, etc. And I've watched Thomas's channel for the last maybe year or so. So he's become my go-to person for all things Dubai.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's a good place to start, Tom. What is your background? Because I know you're Finnish and you lived in London, right?
Yes, it's kind of complicated. So the short version of the story is I lived in Finland, where I'm from, until university. Then I went to the UK for university. I studied economics. At that point, I was like full on going into finance and like the corporate life. Then I did a couple of internships in big banks and I realized this cannot be my life. I hate this. I need to find a different way to earn my money. And then I started learning about like online business, making money online. Because I was watching a lot of YouTube, I started seeing some of them talk about how much money they make. And I was like, I would like to do that. But I never believed I could actually do it. So it took me a while to actually get started. But eventually, after university, when I was working a job as a software engineer, so around this time I also pivoted from like finance to coding. I learned to code online and things like that. But I still didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. I didn't want to work a job. Eventually, I ended up starting a YouTube channel about coding, which is what I was doing as a career. I was talking about how I learned to code, how I became a software engineer on my own and things like that. That channel took off a couple of years ago in 2022, I believe. And then basically at some point, it just got to the point where the channel was making 5x my salary. And then I was like, okay, I don't want to do this job anymore. And I ended up going full time on that channel. And then shortly after that, I also realized, well, I'm paying 50% tax on this income. Why am I doing this when there's options out there? So I started looking at all the different options in the world. And for various reasons, which we can get into if you want, I ended up moving to Dubai, where I still live to this day. So that's essentially how I got into the world of business. So at that moment, this YouTube channel, which is called Internet Made Coder, was my business. It was making good money. And at some point I started realizing that I could also be making videos about other topics. So I started a second channel which is just my name, Tuomas, which is the one that you guys have probably mainly seen. It was just meant to be like a hobby channel, just talking about topics I want to talk about and I'm passionate about. But then that channel also took off. So I was like, well, I guess this is a second business now. And then so that ended up becoming like a second business, which is now almost my main focus rather than the like main channel, which technically has more subscribers. But interestingly, they make a very similar amount of money, and the smaller channel actually makes more money now. And so those have been the main things that I've been focused on for the past couple of years. And then I also have a software company because I am still a software engineer as well. So I have a software business where I essentially build the software, and then I have a business partner who is marketing it. I know it's kind of an unusual thing where we have like 3 different things, like completely separate businesses. We can get into the details on any of those if you're interested, but that's essentially the short version of the long story of how I've ended up where I am today.
Very cool. When you were studying in the UK, was that in London?
It was in London, yeah.
Okay, so how long did you live in kind of London?
I lived a total of 4 or 5 years. So the university was 3 years, and yeah, so I guess 4 years. 4 years.
And you left in 22?
2023, January of 23.
Okay.
So pretty much until the end of 22, I lived there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why did you leave?
Well, various reasons. The immediate reason was the taxes, because now I could work from anywhere. I was like, well, I don't really want to pay this tax. But also, if I had really loved living in London, I don't think I would have left just for that reason. So there's a lot of lifestyle reasons as well. I didn't like the weather. I always had the dream of living in a place with sunny, warm weather where I can just wear a t-shirt every single day all year round. So I was like, now I can do that. And there's this place called Dubai where you have the great weather and you have no taxes. So this is perfect. There was other reasons as well. Like, I mean, the UK, in my mind, has been like kind of declining over the past couple of years. Safety is not that good there. Like there's more entrepreneurs, like more like-minded people going to Dubai right now. So those are probably the main reasons. And also just because I wanted to try something different. I've also always been kind of like an adventurer. Like I always want to try different things. So I was like, Dubai seems to make a lot of sense financially, lifestyle-wise. It seems like the kind of place where I want to go. And it was very easy to get residency. So I was like, okay, let me just try. And if I don't like it, I can always go back. So that's kind of the main reasons, I would say.
Nice. Is this happening more and more now? Are more and more people leaving in general?
Yes. Like the statistics tell us that yes, and also anecdotally, there's pretty much every single person that I know in London either has left or wants to leave. The ones that haven't left are just there because their job is there and it's not that easy to leave if you're working like a normal job. But all people I know there who are like entrepreneurs are either actively leaving or they have left. And also there's a lot of statistics, like there's statistics on like millionaire migration or like where millionaires are leaving and going. Like UK is like the second highest place in the world where millionaires are leaving the most, which is crazy given how like actually small UK's population is relative to other countries on that list, like India or China or something. So that is a big trend, and that's obviously why, because Dubai have, and other places as well, but Dubai mainly have really positioned themselves to really attract these people who are like escaping the problems in the West. Dubai is like, okay, we'll fix all these problems. We have the safety, we have the low taxes, things work. So more and more people are definitely leaving there and coming here.
What impact do you think this will have for the countries that they are leaving, and what do you think they will do to try and stop it or slow it down?
Well, it's kind of a vicious cycle, because what happens obviously in a country like the UK is that you have the people who make the most money, who pay most of the taxes, right? I know there's a lot of people saying like, oh, rich don't pay any tax, but if you look at the statistics, they actually do, right? They pay like almost half of all the taxes. So then when things get worse, they leave. Now there's even less tax revenue for these countries. So the services and everything like that gets even worse. So they leave in even larger numbers. And at the same time, you have a lot of people coming in who are not necessarily in the category of making a lot of money and then paying a lot of tax. So it's kind of the situation where things will just get progressively worse. I don't know what will eventually happen. Maybe they'll eventually turn it around. But historically, this has also been something where like countries, they rise and then they fall. There's a great book by Ray Dalio. I forgot the changing world order or something like that. It essentially documents this, where like countries rise, like empires rise, and then for all the same reasons they kind of get complacent. Things start getting worse, people get lazier, and then the people at the top start leaving, and now there's less and less resources for like healthcare and all these kind of things. So things get even worse, people leave even more, and then eventually things just get really bad, and there's kind of a revolution or something like that. I don't know if we'll get to that, but like it's probably just gonna keep like getting progressively worse over the past few years. I don't know really what they would do to reverse that. So that's why I'm so like negative on those. Not because I want them to do badly. I want every country to do badly, but why I'm so like of the opinion that if you're there, like it's pretty better to leave, because I don't think it's gonna get any better. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my assessment.
Do you think any of these Western countries are going to do or take steps to stop people leaving or restrict the movement?
Oh yeah, I mean that's again another thing that's happened. Like historically, if you look throughout history, what countries have done, at some point there will be capital controls. So you'll like prevent people from moving their money out of the country, or like other kind of controls to like stop people from leaving. It could be citizenship based taxation, like what the US has, where if you hold a passport, no matter where you live, you pay taxes. That could happen in these like more powerful countries like Canada, UK, Australia, that could feasibly enforce something like that. In the smaller countries, it's maybe a smaller risk just for practical reasons. So that could happen. Exit taxes, like the UK is talking about it. The countries that don't already have that, that is something that could come in, because at some point they have to do something. At least in their view, they're like, all these evil rich are leaving, so we need to stop them from leaving. And eventually, like the people would probably also support something like that, where we either stop them moving their money or stop them leaving the tax system or make it much more difficult. So I think yes. I hope no, but I think yes.
In theory, you'd like them to get more competitive rather than that would be the optimal solution. And then people would have a decision to make. But right now, there's not really a decision to make, really.
Yeah, like
if you can leave.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, that you're right. That would be the best case scenario. We're not seeing a lot of trends of like these countries saying like, okay, let's become more competitive. It's kind of they're taking the other route. But yeah, I hope they would do that, because when there's more viable options in the world, that's always it makes the world better, because now you have all these options and countries have to compete. But sadly, most countries don't see it that way. You only have these couple of countries like UAE, Singapore, and many like developing countries that are actually looking at it like, hey, how can we make our country attractive? How can we offer easy residence programs? How can we offer tax exemptions, things like that? Even a country like China, which is not something that a lot of people are going to move to, they actually have a lot of tax exemptions for foreigners who want to move there, which is something that many people would probably find surprising, given it's like the communist country or something like that. But even they are like approaching this in a much more intelligent way than a lot of these like Western countries as of this moment of time.
When you're evaluating where to set up your company and where to live, so for example, Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, how do you evaluate the best places for your company and the best place to live your life?
Yeah, so there's obviously always kind of two things we need to think about. You have, like you said, you have the business, and then you have your life, like where you actually want to live. And when it comes to the company, I would first think about, okay, where do you actually want to live? Because that will often determine which kind of company setup makes most sense. So where you want to live, it depends on what's optimal financially and what's optimal like lifestyle wise for you. On the lifestyle side, that's just like where do you want to live? Like if money didn't exist, taxes didn't exist, like where do you enjoy the most? That's a very subjective and personal thing, and I can't tell anyone like, oh, you should live here, because people like different kinds of places. And I like different kinds of places. I live in Dubai mainly, but I explore a lot of other places. I might spend like 3 months in this country, because I also like many other places, and the places that I like might be very different to what someone else likes. So that's fine. So that's like something that you just need to kind of determine for yourself. And then on the financial side, that's a lot more objective. And that depends on how much money you make, what kind of business you're in, how much wealth you have. So if you are in a very high income, you want to look at lower tax countries, because obviously that's going to matter a lot more to you than cost of living. If you're in a lower income, let's say you make $3,000 a month, Sure, taxes might matter a little bit, but in that case, you might want to look at countries that have lower cost of living because that's going to have a much bigger impact on your finances than the taxes. So then you need to think about, okay, what is the country that is optimal financially, and what is the country where I actually want to live, and then sort of decide like which one do you prioritize, and sort of in your mind like decide, okay, I prioritize finances like 50% and lifestyle 50%, and then you kind of need to just look at the countries that exist and decide like which one has the best combination for that. Like for example, when I moved to Dubai, because I didn't have a lot of wealth yet, but I had a high income, I sort of thought to myself like, okay, even if I don't like Dubai, I'm just gonna go there because over the next couple of years with the tax savings, I can build up so much wealth that then I can take that wealth to wherever I wanna go, like if I do want to live. Luckily, I've also really enjoyed living in Dubai, and I also did think that I would live in, that I would enjoy living in Dubai. But in that time, finances had like a high importance for me relative to lifestyle. But the more wealth I have, and I think for most people it's like the more wealth you have, the less it matters like where you can save the most money, and then you can start thinking about most like, okay, where do I actually want to live? So usually like in the beginning, you want to just build wealth as fast as possible because the wealth you have is going to improve your lifestyle so much, and your like feelings of freedom and things like that. And then eventually, if you want to go somewhere else, you can do that. So that's kind of how I think about it, and it's always like a case by case decision. So that's where to live. So you asked also about companies. Company setup often. So company setup matters a lot less than people think in like most cases if you have like a simple business, like a one-person business, because often the country where you live is going to tax your company regardless. Even if you set up a company in the UAE, but you live in France, France is still going to tax that company because they have these management and control rules where basically if you manage and like actively operate your company from France in this case, France is still going to tax that company. So if you live in France, like you should probably just set up a company in France because it's just more simple. Same if you live in the UAE, you could do something like set up a company in Hong Kong or the US LLC or something like that. But the UAE is still going to tax that company. So it's just easier to set up the UAE company because it's easier to register it and deal with it when you're in the UAE. There's obviously more complicated cases where you have like multiple people in multiple countries and things like that. And there you need to like think more about like what makes sense. But often what I say to like oversimplify the very complicated topic, if you live in Dubai, if you live in the UAE, you should set up the company in the UAE because again, regardless of where you set it up, UAE is going to tax it, and obviously you can use that company to then get residency in the UAE. That's often the main reason you want to set up a UAE company. If you don't live in the UAE and you live, let's say in Southeast Asia or something like that, often it makes sense to set up something like a US LLC because the US actually doesn't tax the US LLC because by US law it's treated as a tax through, as a pass-through entity. And it's a very light structure, like it's very cheap. You can get a US bank account for it. It's a very easy structure to run. In that case, something like that might make sense. If you have a bigger business and you're kind of living around the world, then Hong Kong company might make a lot of sense because you also get 0% tax in Hong Kong. Well, obviously you still need to consider the country where you live. It might tax it, but for like banking and things like that, that might make more sense. But there's so many different cases and permutations that we can't literally go over that today. But that's kind of like a rough overview.
Okay, interesting. So if you had to pick a top three for where you'd like to live and top three for setting your company up in terms of the pros and cons, do you know what you'd choose?
Top three to live? Well, for now, like if I had to live in just one place for the entire year,
Exactly, yeah.
Imagine that case. I would still live in Dubai, maybe not forever, although maybe I would live, who knows. Dubai is still probably number one. Singapore might be number two. It has a lot of the same benefits as the UAE. It's has good banking, it's safe, modern, tax friendly. I mean, they have taxes, but they're quite friendly. On the third place, it would be kind of difficult. It would probably be somewhere like Bangkok, Thailand. That's mainly just for lifestyle reasons. I just really like the place. Or I also like Hong Kong. I also like Bali. There's a lot of different places I like, but all of them have like different pros and cons. So I'm not sure exactly what I would pick, but it would be somewhere in Southeast Asia, possibly Bangkok if I had to give you one right now. And it's also always here, you also need to consider like where can you get residency. Some countries are much easier to get residence visas than others. So all these three countries, you always have like options. In terms of company setup, again, it kind of just depends on where you live. I would say in the most general case, the US LLC is often the best option. Like if you don't live in Dubai, because it's very easy to run, you get the no tax in the US, and you get the US banking, you get great payment processing and things like that. If you live in Dubai, the UAE company makes a lot of sense. Then the benefit of a UAE company is that you can use it to get yourself a residence permit in the UAE. You only have to stay there 90 days. You get tax residency, so that can be a great setup to have just for kind of that reason. And number three, I would say Hong Kong. If you have like a bigger business, you want to like live around the world. You get great banking and payment processing and things like that. And then maybe number four would be like Singapore. But that again, like if you live in Singapore, that's mainly where the benefits would come.
And do you see yourself having one base going forward, or do you sort of see yourself having sort of 2 or 3 bases and you move between them?
I definitely see myself not staying just in one place. But what I see myself doing, at least in the next couple of years, is kind of what I've been doing so far, which is to live in Dubai roughly half the year, 7 months, something like that. And then kind of every year I pick like, okay, I'll stay 3 months in this year. Last summer I stayed 3 months in Bali. That was like kind of my summer base. But next year I might pick Bangkok, I might pick Singapore, I might pick some other place, just to like try out different places. Because a lot of these places I haven't spent enough time, like a Singapore. I like the place, but I also haven't spent enough time to really understand if I want to live there. So I like to go to different places just to explore, like how would it feel like to live here, kind of like dip my toe in a lot of different places. And over time, I'll build more of an understanding of what I enjoy, where I might want to eventually settle or something. So I'll probably just keep doing something like that, and then like traveling, also like more short-term travel to different places in between. So for the next couple of years, something like that. In the long run, who knows? If I have a family or something like that, like kids, that's gonna have a big impact on the decision. That might mean, okay, let's say I have a kids going to school, that might mean that, okay, practically it's easier if I stay in one place. But if that doesn't happen, or at least until that happens, I'll probably just keep moving around, to be honest.
You haven't mentioned like Europe or the US at all. So is there any plan to live there? Or?
No plans.
Okay.
No plans. If I had to live in Europe, I'd probably be somewhere like Spain just because of the lifestyle and weather. But then the taxes are horrible, the bureaucracy and everything, and like the safety. Like at its current state, I am not considering anywhere in Europe. I'm not considering anywhere in the US. If they improve in the future, maybe, who knows? I'll always keep my eyes open. But also because I'm from Europe, and just for like personal reasons, I find Asia more interesting. Just like that's just the personal reasons. A lot of people might find the history and culture of Europe more interesting, and that's absolutely fine. But for practical and personal reasons, I really don't see myself going to Europe or US for that matter. But who knows?
Focusing on Dubai, obviously at this stage of your life, it's a very good option. Do you see it as a great option for sort of families and all different age groups? Or do you see it a great option just for a very specific type of person with a specific lifestyle?
I think it's definitely a great option for pretty much every category, or maybe not every, there's always specific situations, but it's also a great option for families, in my opinion. They have great schools here. They are expensive though, so that's like, if you have the money for it. Whether it's the best option though, that's a different question. I could see myself like building a family here, like no question about it, but I might feel, okay, maybe a Singapore or some other place is just a bit better. That's really the main question for me. It's definitely most optimal if you have a high income, you have an online business, and you don't have a family, so you can just like live here as tax-free wealth, and then if you want to go somewhere else, then you can. But there's also a lot of families here. It's actually a very family-friendly place, which I think a lot of people would find surprising. And they have great schools and everything like that. It's super safe. I mean, that's a big thing for families. So I would say it's definitely a great option for families as well. If you are an online business owner, it's great. If you have a job, it's going to depend like what kind of job you have, things like that. Retirees, yeah, why not? But then again, like most people might prefer to retire in like a tropical island or something like that. So that's again just a more of a personal thing in that category. So yeah.
Okay. What is the biggest culture shock, do you think, for Westerners when they first come to Dubai? And what do you think they struggle with the most?
honestly, going to Dubai from the West, there's not that many like big culture shock because like, it's actually quite westernized. I would say it feels very similar to like a lot of Western cities, except without the problems. Like you have, it's basically like when you're in like Dubai Marina or something, it's kind of like Los Angeles without the crime, without the taxes, without like all the craziness. So overall, I don't think there's too many like culture shocks you'd necessarily have. There are certain things like when I arrived, like well, I'm coming from Finland, where usually like things work extremely well. Like in Dubai, like 90% of things work extremely well, but sometimes things just don't work that well at all. Like when I was setting up my residency, I had a really bad experience when I was doing it directly with the government. There's like so many small things in the process where it's kind of just stupid, and the people were not super professional, and things like that. So you'll face some situations like that you might not be used to. Again, depending on where you're coming from. And there's some situations where like you're dealing with like local companies, and maybe they're from a totally different culture, totally different country. There might be a very different ways of dealing with things, doing business. So it kind of just depends on like it kind of just depends on who you happen to be dealing with in any given time. If you're dealing with other Westerners, then it's going to be very similar. If you're dealing with companies that are that are managed by people from a lot of different cultures, then you might face a lot of differences. But I wouldn't say there's like one big thing, because it's very, very westernized, and you have a lot of the Western chains and everything like that. So it's quite a comfortable environment to come to from the West, and I think that's kind of how they're targeting it.
Do you think it's a lot more fast-paced than like London?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say that's probably one. It's very, very fast-paced, for sure. That again depends on where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But yeah, things move fast, and broadly I would say is a good thing. For example, I bought a property. It's a very fast process to buy the property. Things move extremely quickly. But yeah, it can be obviously very, very busy, and like you need to be moving fast. I guess one thing maybe like wealth can be like quite in your face here, which you might not be used to in other places. There's always like every night there's like supercars. I hear them when I'm trying to sleep or something like that, and like it's very like opulent. Like they really like put the luxury in your face, which if you're from especially a lot of European cultures, you might feel like like you might feel uneasy about that. That's kind of the culture. That's something that some people might be kind of shocked by. I can't think of much else. That's probably the main things.
If you just moved to Dubai, say you just moved to Dubai and you want to set up a company, you mentioned that living here, it probably makes most sense to just have a UAE company and not have a US LLC. Is that what you would say? Is that kind of your advice, to just have a UAE company? Or is there certain circumstances where it makes sense to also have a US LLC as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. I also have a US LLC. So that's kind of, it depends on, do you do payment processing? Like, do you sell to customers where they need to give credit cards? Because an issue you will have with the UAE company is that payments will often be blocked. Like for some reason, especially from Western credit card companies, if they see a payment going to a UAE company, they still feel like, oh, what is this weird
Amex
UAE?
block it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Amex block it a lot. Yeah. I'm not sure. Can you even use Amex with a UAE Stripe or something like that?
I don't think the UAE Stripe like Amex, no.
Exactly. Yeah. So in that case, let's say you run an e-commerce business like you guys do. I have a software company, so for that, it was like for sure we should set up a US LLC to do that. So in that case, yes, absolutely, you should have a US LLC. So often the structure I recommend is you have the UAE company, which gives you the residency. Then you have the US LLC on top of that, either owned by the UAE company or owned by you personally. It doesn't really matter that much. And that's kind of your operating company where you collect the payments, and then you pay from the US LLC to the UAE company, and then from the UAE company you pay yourself. So if that's not the case, if you don't take card payments, you don't often need to have that US LLC. Maybe there's some other particular cases. Then you can easily just use the UAE company. And I think all of this is going to improve. So maybe in a couple of years, you don't need to have the US LLC anymore. But for now, I always recommend it in that case.
Okay. Do you have any kind of tips for, say you've got that set up, accessing like the US banking, traditional banking system like JP Morgan, etc. from Dubai?
Yeah, unfortunately not. Usually I think it's quite difficult. I'm not aware of. Maybe if you have a bigger business or something, there's maybe ways to do that. But if you have a smaller, simple business, as far as I know, basically you need to forget about
Yeah.
traditional banking. Usually it's Mercury, the like a digital bank that they have that's very friendly to non-US residents, and they accept because they ask for proof of address, but they accept a non-US address. Most banks would not accept that. You can do things like set up like some like business address, like a legitimate business address in the US, and maybe then you can do it. There's probably ways, but for most people it's gonna be difficult, and I haven't looked into all the details on that.
I've heard you need to probably visit the
Yeah,
US
exactly.
and go into a branch, and then it's possible.
Yeah.
But it's going to be obviously depend on certain
Yeah,
circumstances.
as far as I know, it's the address is gonna be, if you can set up like a proper address in the US and you're willing to go there to visit the branch, like you said, I think it's probably possible. But it's like, do you need it so much that it's worth it for you to pay like an office there? Like, maybe in some cases, but it just depends on the circumstances.
In my situation, so Ecom brand mainly sells in the US. I have a UAE company. If I had a US LLC and the distributions from Amazon or Shopify went into the US LLC and they came to my UAE company as a distribution, would that still be tax-free in the US considering it's physical products? So it's not like a consulting. It's actually physical products going around the US. Would the US then try to tax that, do you think, the US LLC?
Yeah, so it depends. And by the way, none of this is tax advice. I'm not your tax advisor. I have no idea what I'm talking about. We're just kind of having a fun conversation. In general, it depends on, is there physical operations in the US? Meaning, like, do you have employees there? Do you have regular contractors there? Or do you have, physical, an office or a warehouse? So I don't know how you sell it. Do you sell it as drop shipping or something? Like, is Amazon FBA?
It'd be Amazon FBA, or it'd be like a third-party warehouse,
right,
in the US. So in theory, you don't own the warehouse; they subcontract, so you're paying them to.
I see. In that case, if it's not technically owned, I'm actually not 100% sure, but I know definitely if you owned the warehouse, then they would tax whatever income is attributable to that warehouse in there. So this is a more of a trickier case. What sometimes I see people doing is that they set up two separate US LLC, one to collect payments, another one to either hire people if they have employees there, or to own that warehouse or to own that stock. And then you can kind of isolate, okay, you just build that other US LLC, whatever it needs to operate, and then you can isolate so that only that portion would be taxable in the US. Again, that would go into a more of a complex situation where you need to speak to a US tax advisor. But that is a setup that you might want to look into at least. But if you don't have any physical people or stock or anything in the US, they would not tax it. If you do, it gets into a more of a complicated situation where they would usually just tax the portion of the income that is sourced from the US in this case.
Okay, interesting. So people have got comfortable with the 0% tax in the UAE, especially people earning less than 3 million dirhams a year. Yeah. That's obviously changed at the end of 2026, where you won't get the small business relief. Mm-hmm. Do you think there'll be a situation where you can have, say for example, you have a golden visa? Do you think you could have a golden visa and then spend less time in Dubai and have a company set up, for example, maybe a Hong Kong, maybe a Singapore, wherever makes most sense, and still have a setup where you benefit from the 0% tax? Or do you think it's just not worth the headache?
Maybe. So it depends. So for companies, the taxation depends on where the company is managed and controlled. Even in the UAE, if you manage and control, and that's a very vague wording. I wish I could give a more precise, okay, this constitutes management and control. But in the law, if you read it, that's all they pretty much say. If you manage and control a company that is set up abroad from the UAE is going to tax that company according to the same laws as if it was a UAE registered company. So if you're able to be in a situation where you can claim that this foreign registered company is not managed and controlled from the UAE, then the UAE will not tax it. So that is absolutely possible. Then it's just a question of how much time can you actually spend in the UAE? How much management can you do from the UAE? And it's kind of, they don't have a strict limit for that. So let's say you spend, but I would say certainly in a case where you spend less than 90 days, because 90 days is usually the threshold for personal tax residents. You spend less than that in the UAE and you don't become a tax resident in the UAE, most likely probably your company would also not be treated as a tax resident, so that would certainly work. But then obviously you need to think about, okay, where is the company managed and controlled then? So theoretically, at least, you could have a situation where you don't do enough management from the UAE, where the UAE would consider it taxable, and you also don't do enough like management, or you don't spend enough time running that company from any other country where they would also consider it managed and controlled there. So you could theoretically have a situation where the company is kind of not tax resident anywhere. But obviously then that depends on like, are you willing to do that? It's obviously, it takes a bit more planning and you have to keep moving around. Maybe you like that for lifestyle reasons anyway, so that can work. But then you are more of in a gray area, because these kind of things are not strictly defined. Like maybe some countries have strict criteria of like when a company is taxable, when a company is managed and controlled, but usually these laws are not designed for people like us who are thinking about like, okay, I spend a bit of time here, a bit of time there. Usually companies are just like, okay, they're managed from here, and that's why it can be like difficult for me to give like a precise answer. So I would say theoretically, yes. Practically, there's like some like planning you need to definitely do around that. But yeah, but it would be like more challenging at least.
Do you think they may delay bringing in the 9% for small businesses, or do you think that's a set deadline for some 2027? And also, do you see them bringing in a personal tax at some point due to international pressures from other countries? Because obviously they don't want to be on the blacklist. They want to have good relations with other countries. So do you think we'll get to a point where, which could be 2028, 2030, do you see that happening?
For the small business relief, my theory has been that they would delay it, but let's see. I have obviously no idea. I have a feeling they could delay it, but they also might not. So it will really just have to see. But I think it's possible. On the personal tax, again, it is possible that they will do that at some point. I know Oman, which is a neighboring country, I think they were at least talking about it very seriously, or they did it, where they introduced a personal income tax. But also they have a very different economy. Like their economy is not doing as well, and there's much more nuance to that. The UAE, from an economic standpoint, I don't think they would need it, because they're actually very, very well run. They run a surplus every single year because they make money through other ways. They own a lot of companies. They earn money from their huge investment portfolio and everything like that. But because of international pressure, it is possible. But again, we'll just have to wait and see. I don't think that would happen anytime soon. They would first start talking about it. It would become like, okay, considering this. And then there will be at least a couple of years until they actually implement it. So people would have time to like figure out like, okay, do I want to stay or leave or something like that? But let's see. But in any case, it would not be like Western levels. It would be like 5%, 10% or something like that. Because if they introduce 50% income tax, I mean, they know that they're going to kill the country, because they rely on expats who come here. A lot of them, at least a big reason, is going to be the taxes. So it would be absolute suicide for them to introduce very high taxes. If they introduce it, it will be very low. And if it's 5%, it's like, okay, it's still 5%. Like, it's still lower than you'll get pretty much anywhere else, at least in any place where you'd actually want to live. So if they do that, I don't think it would have a massive impact, to be honest. People might complain, obviously, but like, when you look at the options, like, are there that many options where you would do better than that anyway?
As an international citizen, obviously we benefit from 0% income tax here. What is the best way to register your investment brokerage accounts so that you benefit from the 0% here? Because obviously if you don't do it correctly, you could still be paying tax if you're investing in the USA or other countries.
Yeah, so generally I want to just have things diversified, just for like asset diversification reasons. So, I mean, for now I only have Interactive Brokers, but eventually I want to like have different brokerages just to diversify that. From a tax perspective, mainly it depends on where you are tax resident. So you shouldn't think too much about like where is the brokerage itself registered. Like Interactive Brokers, I know it's a US company, but that itself doesn't matter, because you're taxed based on where you are resident. What does matter, however, is where your investments are domiciled. So for example, if you hold US stocks directly or US domiciled index funds or something like that, the US is going to apply what's called a withholding tax when you get dividends from it, for example. So let's say a US stock pays you a dividend of $100, because the US and the UAE, in this case, if you're a UAE resident, don't have a tax treaty the US is gonna tax that dividend before it essentially reaches you. But if you live in a country where you do have a tax treaty with the US, then you don't need to worry about this. So again, it mainly depends on where you live, where your investments are, and does your country and the country of your investments have a tax treaty. That's like those are the three things you need to think about here. So if you're investing into US equities or something like that, and you are living in a country like the UAE that does not have a tax treaty with the US, what you can do is buy Irish domiciled index funds or Irish domiciled investment funds that these funds invest in the US stocks. So your investment is actually living in Ireland, or it can be other places as well, but usually it's Ireland. So you're not going to be hit with that dividend withholding tax. So that's the main thing that people often get wrong. If they're living in low tax countries, then they get dividends and they realize, well, wait a second, this dividend has to be taxed, and you didn't realize that. So that's the main thing to worry about. But other than that, if you're investing around the world and you're just keeping that in mind, mainly depends on where you are living rather than where the brokerage is or something like that.
So just for reference, you're saying that the brokerage or your investment is like Dubai based, but you're investing in like Irish versions of the ETF, for example.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of tips on countries where the personal investment portfolio should be domiciled? Like, do you think the UAE is the best for that?
Well, again, like if you hold funds personally, the tax will, like the domicile of this investment will just be basically where you are tax resident. So again, it's just, okay, where do you want to live? If you want to live in countries that has high taxes, then you just need to decide, like, okay, am I willing to pay the taxes for those lifestyle benefits and things like that. But generally, as far as I know, you can't just like go set up a bank account in one country and then think like, okay, the investments are already going to be taxed there. You can, like, if it's like physical things like property, you can buy a property in the UAE and you're going to be taxed only in the UAE because the source of that income is going to be in the UAE. But for things like stocks and things like that, the residence of the income when you receive it is going to be where you are resident, not where the brokerage is, not where the bank account is, and things like that.
Okay. On that kind of investment portfolio side, where else is kind of low tax domicile to get that kind of personal benefit?
Are we talking about places to live?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, well, Singapore is a really good one. If you live mostly on investment income, they have, as far as I remember, 0% capital gains tax. As far as I remember, 0% dividend tax. Yes, they do. So if you are mostly an investor, Singapore is an excellent option. You get essentially the same tax benefits as the UAE. On active income, they have a bit of taxes, not super high, but on investment income, that's great. Switzerland, I believe, also has 0% capital gains, 0% dividend. Off the top of my head, I can't remember too many other places like that. I would have to check.
That's a very small list.
Yeah, exactly. There are places, like when you have mainly investment income, there are more options for sure than if you mainly have active income. But I would have to double check. Those are the ones that come to my mind.
I think Cyprus might be one of them.
Yes, could be. I'm thinking, like, is Hong Kong? Could be. You can check that. I feel like Malaysia has some kind of benefit like that, but I can't remember exactly off the top of my head.
Okay. You mentioned Hong Kong a few times now.
Yeah.
How do you kind of compare the benefits of a US LLC, UAE kind of setup versus Hong Kong? And I think you said Hong Kong should be, if you're a more substantial business. What's that level?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one because Hong Kong and US LLC have like kind of similar benefits in that when you have a Hong Kong company, but you don't run it from Hong Kong will not tax it. So you have a 0% tax in Hong Kong. Same with the US LLC because by US law, it's a pass-through, so the US will not tax it. Apart from those like cases that we discussed earlier where you have like US operations. Same with the Hong Kong company. If you have Hong Kong operations, it will be taxed. So often they are very like comparable setups for someone who lives around the world. Let's say you live in a country like Thailand, where you're not really going to set up a company in Thailand because the business setup options and banking and stuff is not that great there. These two often are the options that I would recommend in those cases. So then the question is, when do you set up a US LLC? When do you set up a Hong Kong company? Broadly, is if you have a smaller business, you want to go for a US LLC. If you have a bigger business, you want to go for a Hong Kong company. And what I mean by bigger business is not like a revenue level or something like that. it's mainly like things like, okay, like are you hiring a lot of people? It can be easier to do that. Actually, that might not be too difficult to do with the US LLC either. But things like if you want to sell the business, the US LLC is a structure that is not meant to be like a sellable business. Like usually if you talk to like US based startup founders, they will always choose to set up like a C corporation, which is like a proper like corporation rather than an LLC, because LLC is mostly not something where it's easy to issue stocks and things like that. So it can be more difficult to sell. So that's why if you're running a business like a software or something that you think, okay, I want to sell it, Hong Kong might be better because it's just easier to do that. If you have like multiple owners, or you think like you might want to take someone on in the future to like become an owner again, because it's easier to issue stocks and things like that. It can be easier with the Hong Kong company. As far as I'm aware, it is probably easier to get like proper traditional banking for the Hong Kong company, although that has also become more difficult in recent years. But the differences are not that huge. Often I would go for the US LLC unless you have a specific reason to go to Hong Kong, because it's cheaper to set up, it's easier to set up. With the Hong Kong, to get that 0% tax offshore exemption in Hong Kong, you need to do a bit more, like you need to like prove to them that it's not managed there. You need to do an annual audit. You need to have proper accounting for it and things like that in Hong Kong, which can add a bit more expenses. So unless you have a reason to do that, then I would probably not. I would probably go more for the US LLC. And also, if you have business with China or something like that, then Hong Kong clearly makes sense because they have integrations with like Chinese payment processing and things like that. But US LLC is definitely more popular, I would say, for at least the kind of business owners that I talk to.
Yeah. Do you know much about if somebody's trying to exit their brand, say they've built an Ecom brand, do you know if there's difficulties if you've done that for a UAE company compared to a US LLC? And as you mentioned, the US LLC, they're not traditionally sold. Someone would set up a C Corp, for example.
Yeah.
So if somebody was going to start a new company and they were looking to exit in, say, 5 years, I'm guessing that the advice would be different. Not that it's advice, but the opinion would be different.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know a lot of the details on that. I don't know a lot of the details. I don't think it would be a massive issue. But it really depends on, okay, where's the person, where's the investor who's buying in and things like that. Often I see, if you want to build like a startup or something, people will recommend either a US structure or a Singapore structure or something like that, just because a lot of when they give out funding, a lot of the contracts they have made are more made for like the US business law or the Singapore business law. So a lot of investors and potential acquirers might be more familiar with either US law or Singapore law, or a lot of these bigger ones, they might be less familiar with the UAE law. So it might make it more challenging in that sense, that it might be more work in that moment when you're selling it. There might be less interest just because some like investor or acquirer might be like, well, okay, I'm not really familiar with this jurisdiction and things like that. I don't think it would be something that would stop it from happening. That's probably something to consider. But beyond that, I don't really know the details because I haven't really dealt with these kind of cases.
Okay. And there's kind of other jurisdictions as well that I think are low tax, like the Cayman Islands. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people would want to live there. Like, sure, some do, but people in their kind of 20s, for example, probably don't want to live there. Yeah. Is it possible to kind of set up operating companies in those places and not live in the jurisdictions and still kind of get the legitimate benefits?
It is possible, but in many cases it's challenging. So usually, again, we mentioned before, companies are taxed based on where they are managed and controlled. So you could set up a company in Cayman Islands, and if you get active management for it and active operations for it in Cayman Islands, then it's only taxable in Cayman Islands. But if you have a business where like you actually want to run it, you actually want to manage it, like realistically, you're probably not going to do that, because what has to happen is that it's not enough that there's like a paper director sitting in Cayman Islands actually doing nothing. It has to be like genuine management where that is happening in Cayman Islands. You yourself are not actually managing it. So if you have the kind of business where you can essentially just outsource it, like it's kind of a simple business where you don't need to like use your brains to run it, that's theoretically possible. There are like literally management companies, as far as I know, that do this in Cayman Islands for this specific purpose. But if you have something like a software that where you need to be managing it, you have a YouTube channel like I do, where I need to be the one to actually decide what videos to make and something like that, that's not really practical. Sure, a lot of people might do something like that. They set up a Cayman Islands company, but they keep running it from their country and kind of just don't tell the authorities. Sure, especially if it's a smaller business, chances are no one's ever going to find out, but that's different from what is legal. I always want to be legal, even if I think it's only a 1% chance that someone might find out. Like, I always want to do this fully legally, which is why it's great. I can just live in Dubai where I can legally pay zero tax, have a very simple setup, which is just the UAE company, and I guess the US LLC on top of that. But these kind of setup with the Cayman Islands and British Virgin Islands, like, you run into that issue, and then you also have banking issues.
Yeah.
It can be difficult to get banking for those companies, and can be a kind of a headache to run those, and it's going to be expensive because you need to hire these people there to actually manage it. So if you have a very big business that you can outsource, like genuinely outsource, it can be done, and it is done, but it is not something that a lot of people could practically do, and it's much more difficult than people might realize.
Okay. If you had to speculate, and this is a slightly off-piste question, but if you had to speculate, what do you think Andrew Tate's setup is?
Obviously, it's going to be very complicated. That I know for sure. Possibly, because he has a lot of different businesses. It's definitely going to have a different business structure for all of them. Then he's going to have different people managing all these businesses. And in terms of his assets, he's probably using something like trusts that own it. And this is not an area where I'm like super familiar, but I heard him say in some cases that he's like technically doesn't own anything. He just like rents stuff. I don't know like the details, and he obviously deliberately didn't reveal the details, but he's using some like very sophisticated structures to like have his assets owned by different companies, and the companies are owned by trusts, and all these kind of things to like essentially shield him from legal liability. And that's like going well beyond like the kind of stuff that I deal with, but he just has a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and I know he has a lot of different citizenships and things like that. And yeah, but that's as far as I know. That's
yeah. In terms of the kind of financial hierarchy, is there a certain point where it makes sense to start looking at this, trust ownership and these kind of things? And if so, what is that kind of level you should start to?
Yeah, I don't know. You need to look at how much it costs to set up a trust. I believe it's going to be at least like multiple tens of thousands. So at the level where that is not a big enough expense for you. That's trust, as far as I'm aware, is mainly for legal protection. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm not sure on all the details on that because I don't deal with that. But basically where you have enough assets where you're willing to pay this like insurance of like setting up a trust, that makes it more difficult for creditors to get to you and things like that. I don't know what an exact number would be, but you at least want to have like a couple of million probably.
So it's like high 7 figures, low 8 figures.
Something like that. Same for like if you want to like buy citizenship or something like that for like protection. Like the Caribbean citizenships cost, what is it, 250,000 plus fees, so something like that. So you need to think like, what level are you willing to spend that on a passport rather than spending it on something else like a house or whatever. So probably if you have like 2 million plus, maybe that starts to make sense. Okay, it's roughly 10% of your net worth or something like that. But probably like below that, you're not in a high enough risk where a lot of this like very sophisticated planning is super relevant. You should probably more focus on like, how can I have a simple setup, make as much money as possible, be as low tax as possible so that I can build that wealth. And then once you have the wealth, you can start looking into all of this to protect the wealth. That's probably what I would say.
Another topic you talk about is Dubai real estate.
Yeah.
They've just announced the first time buyer program where there's a lot of perks for somebody to move here, and they can get I think it's up to maybe it's a 5% deposit, up to 5 million dirhams. Do you know much about this program?
I don't know much about it. I have heard of it. And as far as I know, there's like certain developers that participate in it where, as far as I know, it's for their off-plan projects, or is it only also for ready? I'm not too sure.
I think it's for ready as well, yeah.
It's for ready as well. So I would say if you are in the position where you are a first-time buyer and whatever you would buy anyway, you can qualify for this and get some kind of benefit. You should definitely use it, probably. But if it's, okay, you're buying an off-plan property and only these developers participate, you can take that into account. Okay, if I buy this one, I can get this like discount or a benefit or something like that. But it's probably going to matter more that you're actually buying a project that is good, and something that you actually want. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. I wouldn't like base your like buying decision on it, but
Do you see a lot of risks in buying off plan?
yes, for sure. There's a lot less risk today than there was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, like 5, 10 years ago, Dubai was literally like a wild west. Like there was almost no regulation. You could buy an off-plan property from a developer, and then the developer doesn't finish it, and you just lose your money. Now that cannot happen anymore. There are like the things that have been put into place, like when you buy an off-plan property, your money goes into an escrow account, and the money is only released from the escrow account to the developer, like based on how much the property has been finished or something like that. So essentially your money is safe in that sense. Like you're not going to lose your money if the developer doesn't finish the project or something. Like they're not going to steal your money. It's very secure in that sense. The process is very standardized and everything. But obviously you always have the risks like with any investment. And there is, especially now, a kind of situation in the UAE where there's so much demand for property, a lot of these off-plan projects start to reach the same prices as the ready property. So what we're talking about, let's say you're buying a property that is off-plan, meaning that it's going to be finished in 5 years or whatever, in area, call it in the Creek Harbor. You should logically be paying a lower price for that than an equivalent ready property, right? Because you have to wait for 5 years to either live in it, or you have to wait that 5 years in order to be able to get those rental returns. So you should per square foot be paying less than an equivalent ready property, logically. But now, because there's so much demand for property in Dubai, and these developers, these big name developers like Emar, they have, especially the developers have so much demand. We've got to the point where often these off-plan prices are reaching the same prices as the ready prices, which just kind of makes no sense in most cases, especially if you're thinking of it as an investment. So you really want to look at like what is the actual price you're paying for it. Don't just look at the fancy looking brochure or like listen to the sales agent or something like that. Like compare prices of that project to like similar ready properties in that area. See if it makes sense. Obviously, if you really want that project, you want it for lifestyle reasons, you really want to live in it, of course you can still do it. But that's the main thing to look at. And then obviously there's market risk, like there is with any investment. No one knows what's going to happen to the property market in the UAE. So yeah.
What is your opinion on that? I was about to ask.
I would say that if you look at numbers of like demand and supply, still to this day, demand, so like people moving into Dubai, is exceeding the supply. So at least for the next couple of years, it's probably still going to keep going up. But there is a point, I believe, in like 2027, 2028, where there's a lot of new supply that's scheduled to go into the market. So time will tell whether there's going to be enough people coming to the UAE to meet that demand. I think it easily could, but it also might not. So certainly, I don't think it's going to keep increasing at the same rate as it has been, like crazy, whatever, 20% for the past couple of years or something like that. I also don't think it's going to crash. So I think it's more going to stabilize a little bit, at least in the next couple of years. But in the long run, like in the long run, if I'm looking at, okay, holding it for 10 years, 20 years, you just need to mainly look at like do you believe that Dubai is going to keep being an attractive place? And I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. Like they have a very competent government. They understand that they live off these expats coming here, so they have to make it as attractive and a place as possible. So they keep offering incentives and things like that, make it the best possible place to live, which means that people are going to keep moving into Dubai, which means that there's going to be more and more demand for property. So in the long run, especially, I think it's going to be fine. But again, like who knows? I mainly bought for lifestyle reasons, like I want to live there, so I'm not like too concerned about that. But I don't see like massive risk. There's like some downside risk, like let's say some black swan event happens and people start to leave Dubai, then that could obviously be a bad situation, because people in Dubai are mainly expats. They can more easily leave than if something like that happened in a place like the UK, where it's mainly locals. So there is that potential risk, but I wouldn't say that's likely. But
From your recent research and obviously buying a property yourself, where are the best places you found to live at the moment, and where are the hot areas to buy in terms of returns if you're going to be renting it out or you're going to be living it in yourself? What have you kind of found from your recent research?
Yeah. So first, if you look at, let's say you're buying a place to live, like I did. Again, this is going to be a much more subjective, like where do you want to live, blah blah blah. But some areas I would definitely look at is Dubai Creek Harbor, where I actually ended up buying myself. I think it's a fantastic community, really well planned, and it kind of offers a lot of the same benefits as like a marina in that it's waterfront, but it doesn't have the tourists, it doesn't have the crazy traffic. It has a lot of great restaurants, essentially a very, very pleasant community to live in. So if you're looking to live, I would definitely look into that. Feels very upscale, very, very upscale, but it's not super busy because like it's not touristy, so there's only like people living there, and it's still like kind of up and coming. Like not everyone knows about it. I guess by now most people who are in Dubai are at least going to be aware of it. I would look into that. I would look into Dubai Hills, also a very, very pleasant community. If you're thinking about like livable communities, it's very green. There's a lot of especially nice villas if you're into that. Although I've heard some projects there are not the best quality, so you want to definitely go look at those places. And obviously, we've got the kind of popular ones like Marina downtown can also be great places to live. I lived in Marina for a long time, but after a while, I found I was a bit too touristy. The traffic there is awful. So I didn't feel like super homey in a sense. Like I didn't see myself like, okay, this feels like home. So I wanted to go more to a place like Creek Harbor, which feels like it's more for people who actually live there. With that said, Marina can also be a fantastic place to live as well, especially people who are new, because it has a lot of those restaurants and kind of like experiences you want to do. Downtown, I would definitely live in. Also, obviously, very touristy, very busy, but it's close to a lot of things. You have got those Burj Khalifa views. That's a great option. What else? City Walk is an area that's quite underrated. Very, very nice. Again, like feels kind of polished. MR Beachfront is nice. Those, if I had to give like a couple of suggestions, those would probably be the ones. In terms of investment, again, it depends. Are you looking at buying a rental property or off plan? For rental yields, some areas, and I made a full video on like listing out like all the top ones, but there's JVC has been a really good one. So Jumeirah Village Circle, very high yields. You have Arjan. So these are areas that are not as nice to live, but often where like a lot of like young professionals or something like that will go to live and rent. So it's mainly people who rent there. So it can be good if you invest there as like a rental property, because it has more relative demand for rentals than people buying. And then you have, I believe, Al Furjan. He has good deals. Production City, Motor City. There's like a long list of areas, and you can actually just, this data is pretty much public. Like you can go to sites like Property Finder. You can almost like find what the average rental is, the average price to buy. You can like find. But those are some of the top of my head. For off plan, again, I don't like to speculate too much, but there's Dubai South. It's like an almost a new city that they're building, like in the south of Dubai. There's going to be a new airport there. So that's interesting to look into. And then there's going to be Palm Jebel Ali, which is like to the west side of Marina. It's going to be like Palm Jumeirah, except much bigger. And what some people are speculating is that that kind of link from Dubai South to Palm Jebel Ali is going to have a lot of demand, because there's going to be a lot of new stuff there. And it's going to be close to the new airport. So that might be interesting to look at. There's Dubai Islands, which is like a waterfront community on the other side of Dubai. The reason I'm interested in that is because there's not that much waterfront, like new communities coming up, because most of the waterfront stuff is already built up, and usually waterfront is a very safe bet. So look into those for sure, but obviously no one ever knows.
How easy is it to get a mortgage out here? What is what is involved with doing that, and how long does the process take?
If you're self-employed, it's not easy. It's actually quite challenging. Luckily, I had a friend who went through the process, found a good mortgage advisor, and he was able to just give me the contact of that mortgage advisor. So I didn't have to deal with any of the issues, but he was struggling to get it for a long time. Like he was speaking to banks, and the banks are very conservative here, which is good in the sense that they're more safe. Like they just don't just give out mortgages to everyone. The down payments can be higher and things like that. But different banks have different requirements. Usually, if you're a business owner, you need to have been running your business here for normally minimum of 2 years at least, often 3 years for many banks. What I would recommend is you find a mortgage advisor who can like shift through, like who has the experience of knowing like which banks have what requirements, because otherwise it's going to take a long time to like approach these banks one by one. So this is what I did. So I was able to just find a bank that he recommended and just went through the process, and it was quite simple once I actually had that contact. One thing to consider for self-employed people again is your minimum down payment is usually 40%, which can be quite high, especially for people coming from the West where you're used to like very low down payments. If you're employed, so you're working for a bigger company, you can get 20%, and if you're Emirati, you can get 50%. But below that, you'll pretty much never get below that. So those are the things to consider. But once you find the bank and you're willing to put up that down payment, then it's a pretty smooth process, especially if you have someone you're working with. They can like, they just essentially take care of it, and you have to go to the bank a couple of times and things like that. But yeah.
What was the kind of timeline involved, and what's the rate roughly that you
So for me, I got 4.49%. I believe it's fixed for a couple of years and then it becomes variable or something like that. I forgot exactly. So I started the process of getting the mortgage. Let's see, it was like end of July. I believe I got the pre-approval around August. So then I was like, okay, I have this amount that I'm approved for. I can start looking at properties. I started looking at properties around mid-August. Actually very quickly found the one that I actually ended up buying within like maybe a week, 2 weeks of that.
Wow.
And so then after that I was like, okay, this is the property I want, lock it in. And it took a couple of days to like negotiate, like my agent was negotiating with the seller. We agreed on the price, and this was late August, and as of this recording it is the beginning of October, and next week I'm most likely about to fully close so I can like move in. Usually it's actually faster than this. The thing is, with this case, the seller was being a bit slow. Like there was some situation where like they had to be in Dubai to like do something at a bank, but then they were traveling and like it got delayed a bit. So usually it would even be faster than that. I know a friend of mine got everything done in just like 3 weeks or something like that. And so even for me it's fast by international standards, but usually it's even faster than that.
Due to the strict rules in Dubai, are there any risks or penalties if you default on the mortgage?
They used to be like, it used to be literally like if you default, it's like a criminal thing.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore. I just checked this earlier. So don't worry about that. But like if you try to avoid paying it, but you could actually pay, then like you might get into some issues. But if you're genuinely in a situation where you cannot pay it, I mean, obviously they can come after your other assets and things like that, but I think that's probably the case in most places. But like you're not gonna go to jail for that. So I wouldn't like. I would say it's the same kind of worry that you would have as in any other place. So if you cannot pay and you can prove that, then you criminally like you'll be fine. So I wouldn't worry about that, to be honest.
Okay, nice. And beyond housing, in Dubai they obviously have lifestyle memberships, like we're members of Privily, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Which ones do you recommend?
There's your Privily is a good one. I haven't got that myself, but I heavily considered it at one point. There's another similar one called ADV Plus. So what these memberships do, they give you access to a lot of gyms for like one membership, and I was very surprised how good they are in terms of the prices. Like I had the ADV Plus. Actually, I got it for my girlfriend last year, and for the same price as we would have had to pay for a single gym membership, we got ADV Plus, and now instead of one gym, we just get access to pretty much any gym, well not any gym, but the ones that are part of the program, which there's a lot of them. So these are really good ones if you are going to like commercial gyms and you don't always want to go to the same ones. They also give, what else do they give, like a beach club access, something like that, like you want to book paddle or something like that. These are really good ones. So ADV Plus, Privily, similar. Privily is a bit more expensive, but they give you access to a bit more things, so you can compare the offerings to see what makes more sense for you. Other than that, a really good one that I recommend for literally everyone is called Entertainer. So this is like an app that allows you to get a lot of discounts in restaurants. So if you're a couple, it's pretty much a no-brainer. So what they give you is like buy one, get one offers in a lot of restaurants around Dubai where let's say you go there with your girlfriend and you get one main each, one of those mains is going to be free. So it's literally just 50% off. and a lot of other discounts like that as well. So we use it all the time when we're going out with my girlfriend. Even when I was single, I was using it, and sometimes I would literally just get 2 meals for the price of one in a restaurant because I like to eat a lot. So that's a really good one to look into, especially if you're a couple. Those are really the main ones. There's also like a lot of credit cards that give you different benefits. So I'm a priority banking customer at Emirates MBD. If you're a priority banking customer, which you can get by having a minimum salary of 50,000 dirhams a month, I believe, or holding some minimum deposit. With that, you get access to a credit card, which gives you free gym access around Dubai, kind of similar to Privily. So I didn't need to even have that membership. I could just go to the gym for free because I had this credit card, and the first year is free as well. So it was like kind of a no-brainer. So you should look into those programs and a lot of different credit cards because they have a lot of like benefits that you can benefit from.
I was going to ask you that. So the credit cards,
Oh, yeah.
which ones would you recommend for sort of travel hacking? If you're somebody who wants to get points, upgrade to business class, etc.
Yeah, so the main ones, if you want to get specifically airline points, Emirates MBD has the Emirates Skywards Infinite. So especially if you fly a lot with Emirates, that's a good one. And it's also a really good one because it gives you silver status with Emirates, which what that does is, for example, when you're checking in, you don't have to go to the normal line. There's a specific line where for silver members, you essentially get like business class check-in with the same like business class check-in line, even if you're not flying business class. We've used it a couple of times and it's been a lifesaver. We had like a massive queue for the economy, but we had silver, so we just went through the business class. That also gives you Emirates points and things like that. You want to just look at like, okay, how much would you actually be flying? Like, do you want to have those points, or would you rather just have a credit card that gives you straight cash back where you can choose to spend it on flights or whatever you want? Another one that, this is like pretty much everyone should get the WEO credit card. So WEO is a digital bank in the UAE. Pretty much the best bank in the UAE in terms of like user experience, and they have a credit card that gives you 2% cash back on everything. And I like it specifically because they give you this cashback on absolutely everything. Because a lot of the cashback credit cards in the UAE, they will have like categories like, okay, this category doesn't apply, and like if you're spending on this category, then you only get half, and you need to like think a lot about like which card to use on which transaction. What I like with the WEO one is very simple. You can use it on any type of transaction. You always get the cashback, and it's paid in cash, and not like some points that you have to redeem at specific places. So I like that one because it's just very simple, very easy. If you don't want to think about like what card to use for what transactions, that's a good one. For a long time, I was using this First Abu Dhabi Bank cashback credit card, which gives you 5% cashback on dining and groceries. But I don't recommend it anymore for a couple of reasons. First of all, they increased the threshold where you need to essentially spend a minimum amount every month to get any cash back, and with that card I would not be spending that much, so pretty much it's useless now for me. And also they have a lot of these things where I would go to a restaurant where technically I'm supposed to get 5% because of this cash back, but then it would just not work, like it wouldn't give me the points because in their system it wasn't categorized as a restaurant or whatever or something like that. So there's a lot of these credit cards that claim to have these benefits, but then there's a small print where you don't actually get it. Those are nowadays I like to keep it more simple, so I just use the WEO one pretty much everything. I have the priority banking one, which also gives you 5% on transactions above 5,000 dirhams. So it's good to have if you have like large transactions, and obviously it gives you that what did I say, gym access. And also gives you 4 free airport transfers every single year, and also the Emirates one also gives that. And a lot of these also give lounge access. So it's good to have at least one credit card that gives you like airport transfers and lounge access, and then have maybe another one just for like cashback and things like that. But there's a lot of different ones that I haven't even explored.
With the Emirates MBD, are you better to go with the card with Emirates MBD or Emirates Islamic?
I'm not aware of the Emirates Islamic one. I don't know exactly what it gives. I just remember at the time when I looked at it, which was a year ago, 2 years ago, the Emirates MBD one seemed like the best one, but they could have something else that I'm not.
I think they have some extra perks with the Islamic one. That's
yeah.
why I wondered, but I wasn't sure if an expat, we can use the Emirates Islamic Bank, just same as we can with the Emirates MBD. I don't know if they're related or.
I think it should be fine. Like you can use it, but yeah, I don't know exactly. I should look into that after this.
Okay, and the WEO.
Yeah.
So, for example, myself, I got the credit card.
Yeah.
My limit wasn't that much to start with. Like
Right.
when I got approved, because I wanted to get approved as soon as possible, so I get the 2% back. Do you know how you can increase that limit?
Actually, I don't know. I would like to increase it as well
Because I spoke to them. Yeah, I spoke to them, and they said they didn't give me any good response. I did a little bit of search online, and some people said cancel it and then reapply.
Oh,
Now you've got a better track record with them. But it doesn't.
Right.
I just wondered if you knew if there was a way that you could just do that without.
No,
hassle.
I'm not aware. I'm not aware. I wish I knew because I'd like to
Okay.
do that as well.
I think we've talked a lot about kind of getting set up in Dubai from a kind of business perspective. In terms of like visa access and moving out here, I know they've launched like a creator golden visa recently. Can you talk to that and kind of other ways people can kind of get residency in
Yes,
Dubai?
I have that visa.
Congrats.
I got
Okay.
it. Well, I haven't like gone through the process to actually get the golden visa, but I was approved, like nominated for
Okay.
it.
How was that kind of process
It,
and
it
who's
was
it
like it was interesting. Like there is not much information about it. I'm gonna make content on it once I actually go through the process. But essentially, it's just like if you are an influencer with an audience, like you can apply, but there's no like threshold for like how many subscribers, followers you should have or anything like that. I applied through this agency, or I don't know what they are called, Creators HQ.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the only way to apply, but that's the only source where I found information about it, and that's the only way I found out how to apply for it. So this is not like an endorsement or anything. Maybe there's a way to do it directly with the government that's easier. I had to pay them like a fee, like a subscription, 1,000 dirhams or something like that for 6 months. And then I just filled an application form. They asked me for like my basic details and then my social media account. So I put both of my YouTube channels, and they did just ask something like how are your channels beneficial to the UAE? Obviously, in my case, it was easy to explain because one of my channels is literally like promoting UAE almost. Maybe that played a part, maybe it didn't. I actually don't know why they approved me. But then a couple of months later, it actually took quite a while, like 2 months, 3 months for them to get back to me. I just received an email that I've been nominated, and now I need to like go through the process to like cancel my current visa and then get this new golden visa, which I just haven't done yet, but I'm about to do that very soon. So this day, even though I go approved, like I don't know how to give advice on like, okay, if you have this kind of channel, you're gonna get approved. I heard somewhere that if you make like UAE content, then that's gonna be helpful. So it's very possible that it helped for me. But it could have also been because of my other channel where I have a lot more subscribers. So it really is difficult. So if you have a social media channel and it has even like some kind of size, you might as well apply and I guess see what happens. But on any more details, I'm not that sure actually. But there are many different ways to get this golden visa or any other type of visa. Basically, the UAE, as long as you have a way of making money and or you have money, you can get a visa. Like there's a category for you. Usually it's going to be the route of you set up a company and then you hire yourself, you get yourself a residence visa, very simple, easy process. If you are able to qualify for the golden visa, whether it's the creator one or buying a property, that's going to be preferable because it's going to be for 10 years. You don't need to worry about renewals. You don't need to necessarily have the UAE. You don't necessarily need to have the UAE company if you don't want to have it, if you want to have a different kind of business structure. So you want to look at all the different categories. The most common one is if you buy a property above 2 million dirhams, which is about 500,000 US dollars. It doesn't even need to be fully paid off. Even if you just get a mortgage, even if it's just 20% down payment, you have the property. For as long as you have that property, you can keep that golden visa and just renew it every 10 years. That's the simplest way. Then you have these like more niche programs like the content creator one, which I've been approved for. If you work in specific industries, like you work in tech or like research, like some categories, you can get it via that. I know someone who actually works for a company in like technology or something like that, and he was able to get the golden visa because of what he does. And then there's like other ones. If you are like an outstanding student, you graduated from a good university with amazing grade, something like that. There's like all these different categories, but there's like a simple list on the UAE government website which you can look through, see if any of the categories apply for you. If so, you can get it and you can just have it in your back pocket. Even if you don't want to stay in the UAE, you don't have to. And that's actually a good benefit because if you have the employment visa via your company, which a lot of people do, it's actually a requirement that you have to enter the UAE once every 6 months. So that's not as easy to like just keep it as a plan B if you don't necessarily want to live in the UAE. So that's something to be aware of with that visa. So if you can get the golden visa, you're not going to have that requirement. And there's many others. If you're a freelancer, there's a freelance visa or something like that. If you work remotely, there's a remote work visa. If you have a company set up somewhere else, you could probably just hire yourself via that remote company and also get a visa for yourself via that. Although that one is only going to be for 1 year instead of 2 years for the normal employment visa. So usually it's easier to have the UAE company and hire yourself via that. But there's basically just a ton of different options.
Okay. Talking of content creators, I've heard rumblings that there is like a permit or something that you need to kind of register for if you're in Dubai making content. Do you know much about that?
I was looking into this exact thing when I was first moving here, and it was, again, one of those things, very difficult to find information. As far as I was told at this time, and I still don't know if it's fully correct, if you're doing it personally, in your personal name, you will need to have this permit. But if you're doing it by a company, like I have my company, which technically does the content creation, and I have the, when you set up a company, you need to choose your business activities. If you choose like marketing or like whatever it was, like social media marketing as the business category, then you wouldn't need it. At least that's what I was told at the time. But if you were to do it without a company, then you would need to have this permit. But again, it's kind of one of those things where there's not much information. Many people just don't exactly know what is going on. So I still don't fully know if that was the correct thing to do, but I haven't had any issues. So, and I don't know anyone who has actually got that permit. And I know a lot of content creators. So I would not worry about it as long as if you do have a company.
Tuomas, thank you so much for doing this one. I've really appreciated you kind of coming on and sharing knowledge. We will be back for part 2, where I want to kind of dig into your business journey.
Right. Yeah, very happy to be here. Very happy to be here. Always happy to talk about all these topics.
Perfect.
Thanks, Tuomas.
Scaling an ecom brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.